My name is Claire Ashford. I'm 34 years old. And 2 months ago, I sat at a table surrounded by 40 people who looked right through me like I was made of glass. It was the Ashford family reunion, an annual event held every summer at my in-laws' lake house in upstate New York. White tents on the lawn, catered barbecue, string lights over the water, the kind of gathering that looks like a catalog shoot from the outside. I had spent 3 days preparing for it. I drove 4 hours from our apartment in Philadelphia. I baked 2 pies from scratch because my mother-in-law, Diane, had mentioned offhandedly that the caterer didn't do desserts. I brought activity bags for the children, sunscreen, extra folding chairs from our garage because Diane said they were short. I arrived at 7 a.m. to help set up while my husband, Brandon, slept in until 10. By noon, 40 members of the Ashford family had arrived. Cousins, aunts, uncles, grandchildren. A loud, laughing, sunburned crowd of people who had known each other their entire lives and had never quite figured out what to do with me. That's when it happened. Diane was giving what she called the grand tour to a group of relatives who hadn't visited the lake house before. New renovation, expanded deck, the whole performance. I was carrying a tray of lemonade glasses across the lawn when she stopped the group right in front of me. She looked at me. She smiled. And then she said, clear as a bell, loud enough for all 40 people nearby to hear, "Oh, and this is Claire. She's just here to help with the serving today. Aren't we lucky she could make it?" Laughter. Polite, oblivious laughter. Not a single person asked if I was family. I stood there holding a tray of lemonade that I had made from scratch, wearing an apron that I had brought from home, in front of 40 strangers who now believed I was the hired help. My husband, Brandon, was standing 6 feet away. He heard every word. He looked at his shoes. That was the moment I realized something I had been avoiding for 2 years. And that night, for the first time, I decided to stop hiding what I had been quietly building in the background. Before I tell you what that was, drop a comment right now telling me, has anyone ever introduced you in a way that made you feel invisible? Because I want to know I'm not the only one. And if this story is already hitting home, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps more than you know. Now, to understand why that moment on the lawn broke something open inside me, I need to take you back to the very beginning. The Ashford family lives in the kind of world where appearances are a full-time job. My father-in-law, Gerald Ashford, spent 30 years building a regional insurance company from the ground up. He sold it 8 years ago for enough money that nobody in the family ever has to worry again. He is the kind of man who shakes every hand in a room and remembers every name. Warm, charming, strategic. The kind of warmth that has a purpose behind it. My mother-in-law, Diane, is the architect of the family's image. She chairs the local historical society. She sits on the board of 2 nonprofits. She hosts Christmas, Easter, the 4th of July, and the annual reunion with the precision of a military campaign. Her home is always perfect. Her children are always presented perfectly. And for 7 years, since I married her son Brandon, she has never quite known what to do with me. Brandon is the middle of 3 children. His older brother, Garrett, is a cardiologist in Boston, married to a woman named Stephanie, who was a corporate attorney before she had children and now serves on every committee Diane can recruit her for. His younger sister, Paige, is getting her PhD in neuroscience at Johns Hopkins. She is Diane's obvious pride. Every family gathering involves at least one mention of Paige's research. And then there's me, Claire Ashford, née Morrison, elementary school teacher. Philadelphia Public School District, 3rd grade. I teach 8-year-olds how to read, how to add, how to be kind to each other. I love my job with a depth I can never quite explain to people who expect a more impressive answer at dinner parties. I don't have a title that impresses anyone at Ashford gatherings. For 7 years, I tried anyway. I brought food, I helped set up and clean up. I remembered every cousin's birthday, every child's allergy, every family inside joke. I thought that if I made myself useful enough, generous enough, present enough, they would eventually make room for me. What I didn't realize was that they had already decided what room I fit into. The help. It started small, the way these things always do. The first Christmas, Diane handed me a dish towel without asking and pointed me toward the kitchen. I assumed it was a gesture of inclusion. I went. The second year, I was assigned the dessert table before I'd taken my coat off. By the third year, I had a role at every Ashford event, and it was always the same one. Setting up, serving, cleaning up. Never seated at the main table until after the food had been brought out. Never introduced to new guests as Brandon's wife first. Always Claire, who is so helpful, or Claire, she brought the most wonderful pie. My own name had become a synonym for useful. Brandon noticed. I know he did because there were moments when I caught the flicker of discomfort crossing his face. But he never said anything. That's the thing about people who grow up inside a family like the Ashfords. Challenging the system feels like challenging gravity, so I stopped waiting for him to say something, and I started doing something else entirely. 18 months before that reunion, I had been given an unexpected gift. My third grade class won a small grant from a local arts foundation. The grant was for creative enrichment, and part of the award included a set of professional bookmaking and design equipment that the school didn't have storage space for. My principal, a practical woman named Mrs. Ockhafer, told me to take it home and use it over summer. So I did. I had always written. Privately, quietly, the way you do when you've been told your whole life that what you make isn't important enough to share. Journals mostly, short stories that I typed and then closed and never showed anyone. But that summer, with the equipment sitting in our spare bedroom, I started doing something different. I started writing a children's book. Not the kind with talking animals or magic wardrobes, though I love those. I wrote a book about a girl who feels invisible at school, who sits in the back row and brings extra pencils for everyone and always knows the answers but never raises her hand. A girl who one day realizes she has been so busy taking care of everyone else that she forgot to take care of herself. I called it The Girl Who Kept the Pencils. I illustrated it myself, badly at first, then with practice, with watercolors and ink. I designed the layout on the bookmaking equipment. I printed one copy. I set it on my nightstand and didn't touch it for 3 weeks. Then I sent it to one literary agent. Just one. Because I wasn't ready to be rejected by more than one person at a time. She wrote back in 11 days. I'd like to schedule a call to discuss representation. I didn't tell Brandon. I didn't tell anyone, because by then I had learned something important about myself. Hope is a private thing. You protect it until it's strong enough to survive being seen. Over the next 14 months, my agent, a woman named Judith Crane at a boutique literary agency in New York, submitted the manuscript to 12 publishers. 4 passed, 3 asked for revisions, 2 went silent. And then on a Tuesday morning in March, while I was eating cereal before school, Judith called me. "Claire, we have an offer." I sat down on my kitchen floor. Just sat down, right there on the tile, with my cereal going soggy on the counter. A publisher in New York wanted The Girl Who Kept the Pencils, middle grade picture book, illustrated edition. They were offering a contract and advance a publication date. My book was going to be real. I signed the contract. I kept working with my illustrator, a wonderful woman in Portland named Danny, who took my rough watercolors and turned them into something breathtaking. I kept going to school every day. I kept teaching my 3rd graders. I kept showing up to Ashford family events with pies and folding chairs and dish towels, and I kept my secret. Until the day on the lawn when Diane called me the help in front of 40 people. That night, lying in bed listening to Brandon breathe beside me, I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not an angry one. A quiet, clear, absolute decision. I was done being invisible. If you've made it this far, I want to pause and ask you something. Have you ever worked on something in secret because you were afraid the people closest to you wouldn't believe in it? Tell me in the comments. Because what happens next, I think you're going to want to see it. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the rest. The morning after the reunion, I called Judith. "I have news," I said. My publisher set a release date, and they want to do a launch event. She told me the details. A bookstore in Manhattan, a well-known independent called Maple and Main on the Upper West Side, had agreed to host my launch. They did events for debut authors regularly. Judith said it was a genuine opportunity, not a vanity affair. There would be press outreach, social media, a local children's literacy nonprofit that wanted to co-sponsor the evening. A real event, for my real book, with my name on the invitation. I booked the date, October 14th, a Saturday evening. Then I sat at my kitchen table for a long time thinking about what to do next. I thought about not telling the Ashfords at all, just letting October 14th come and go and seeing if any of them noticed afterward when the book appeared in stores. That option was tempting. It had a certain poetic justice to it, but I thought about something else too. I thought about my own mother, Barbara Morrison, who taught piano lessons out of our living room in Akron, Ohio, for 30 years. Who made me practice even when I cried, who drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to see my college graduation. Who, when I called her on the night Judith made the offer, simply said, "Baby, I always knew it." I thought about what it would mean to have her there. I decided to tell people, selectively, carefully. I told my mother first. She cried, which made me cry, and then she booked her train ticket before we even got off the phone. I told my 2 closest friends from college, Mara and Jess, who immediately started a group chat called CLAIRES Book Era that filled up with all caps messages within minutes. I told Mrs. Aucaffer, my principal, who looked at me across her desk with wet eyes and said, "I'm putting this in the school newsletter whether you like it or not." I did not tell Brandon, not because I didn't want him there, because every time I started to form the words, something stopped me. A memory. The sound of his shoes hitting the grass as he looked at them while his mother called me the help. The years of quiet non-defense. The countless times he had squeezed my hand under tables and said later, "She means well." I needed to know something before I told him. I needed to know if he would show up for me the way I had always shown up for everyone else. So instead, I told him this. "Brandon, I have an event in New York on October 14th. Something professional. I'd like you to come." He asked what kind of event. "Something that matters to me," I said. "That's all I want to say right now. Will you come?" He said yes. Without hesitation, without conditions. Just yes. That yes meant more to me than he knew. Meanwhile, the weeks leading up to October 14th were the strangest of my life. I was simultaneously the same person I had always been: a 3rd grade teacher, wife, Ashford family peripheral member, and an entirely different one. Advance copies of the book arrived at my apartment in a box. I opened them alone while Brandon was at work. I held one in both hands for a long time. My name on the cover, Claire Ashford. The dedication page read, "For every child who carries extra pencils," and for my mother who carried me. I put the box under the bed. 2 weeks before the launch, the Ashfords called a dinner. Nothing special, just a family Sunday at Gerald and Diane's house in Westchester. We drove up from Philadelphia. Garrett and Stephanie came. Paige drove down from Baltimore, the usual configuration. Over dinner, Diane asked Brandon about his work. She asked Garrett about a medical conference he'd attended. She asked Paige 3 separate questions about her dissertation. She asked Stephanie whether she'd decided to go back to law part-time. She asked me to refill the water glasses. I refilled them. I sat back down. I ate my salmon and said very little and thought about the box under my bed. Garrett mentioned a charity auction Stephanie had organized. Diane praised her extensively. Paige talked about a paper she was submitting to a journal. Gerald asked detailed follow-up questions. At one point, Gerald turned to me with the generous smile he used on people he wasn't sure what to do with and said, "Claire, how are things at school?" "Fine," I said. "Really good, actually." "3rd grade still?" He nodded vaguely. "Great, that's great." Then he turned back to Paige. I looked at Brandon. He was eating his salmon. He caught my eye and gave me the small, tired smile I had come to recognize as his apology for things he didn't know how to fix. I smiled back, because in 3 weeks, something was going to change. And I had decided, sitting at that dinner table, exactly how I wanted it to happen. The following Monday, I mailed an invitation to Gerald and Diane's house. Cream envelope, proper card, the way Diane always sent her own invitations. Inside, it read, "You are warmly invited to the launch of The Girl Who Kept the Pencils by Claire Ashford. Saturday, October 14th, 7:00 p.m. Maple and Main Bookstore, New York City. Light refreshments. Brief reading. Book signing to follow." I mailed one to Garrett and Stephanie. One to Paige. One to Brandon's Aunt Carol, who had always been quietly kind to me at family events and slipped me an extra piece of pie when Diane wasn't looking. I did not explain anything in the notes, just the invitation. Let them figure out what it meant. Brandon's copy I left on his pillow on a Wednesday night. He came to find me in the kitchen where I was grading papers at the table. He stood in the doorway holding the card. His face was doing something I hadn't seen it do in a long time. something that looked like reckoning. "Claire." He said my name quietly. "Is this yours?" "Yes." He looked at the card again. "You wrote a children's book." Illustrated it too, mostly. I had help with the final art, and they're launching it at a bookstore in Manhattan. Yes, the silence stretched between us. I kept my eyes on my papers, though I wasn't reading a word. "How long?" His voice was careful. "How long have you been working on this?" 18 months, I said, "since last summer." He sat down across from me at the table. I finally looked at him. His face wasn't defensive. It wasn't confused. It was something I hadn't expected. It was ashamed. "I should have known," he said. "You should have been able to tell me." "Maybe," I said, "but I needed to build it somewhere safe first. And I wasn't sure our house was safe." That landed the way I knew it would. He didn't argue with it. He just nodded slowly. And then he said, "I'll be there, front row." I believed him. October 14th arrived on a clear, cool Saturday with the kind of New York sky that looks professionally lit. Brandon and I drove up from Philadelphia in the morning. My mother was already there, waiting at the hotel where we were meeting everyone, wearing her good blue coat and holding a bouquet of yellow tulips that made me cry immediately. Mara and Jess arrived from Brooklyn. Mrs. Ockhafer came on the train from Philadelphia. Aunt Carol, Brandon's aunt, had texted me that morning saying she wouldn't miss it for anything. I didn't know who else was coming. Maple and Main was a beautiful store. 2 floors of dark wood shelves, warm light, the smell of paper and old coffee. They had arranged chairs in the back, a small podium, a table displaying stacked copies of The Girl Who Kept the Pencils. My book, on a table, in a real bookstore in New York City. 40 copies with my name on the spine. By 6:45, the seats were filling up. The literacy nonprofit had brought several board members. Judith was there in a camel-colored blazer, looking quietly pleased. A journalist from a parenting magazine had confirmed attendance for a piece on debut children's authors. And then, at 6:52, the Ashfords arrived, all of them. Gerald and Diane, Garrett and Stephanie, Paige, even 2 cousins I hadn't expected. Diane walked in the way she walked into every room, leading with her chin, scanning, assessing. She saw the chairs, the podium, the table of books. She saw the display card with my name and my cover. She stopped walking. Gerald took 3 more steps before he realized she had stopped and turned back. Brandon put his hand on my shoulder from behind me. I felt him stand up a little straighter. Diane turned to find me in the room. When her eyes landed on me, I watched the sequence of realizations move across her face. The event is for Claire. Claire wrote a book. The book is already printed and stacked and displayed. This is not a small thing. This is not a hobby. This was happening before tonight, long before tonight, while I was calling her the help. I walked over to them. "Gerald, Diane," I said, "thank you for coming. I'm really glad you're here." Diane looked at me, then at the books, then back at me. She opened her mouth, closed it. Gerald took my hand in both of his. His handshake this time was different, not the charitable warmth he usually deployed on me, something more genuine and more uncomfortable. "Claire," he said, "I had no idea." "I know," I said simply. "That's okay." Diane finally found her voice. "You wrote a children's book." "I did, and it's being published." "It is. It releases nationally next month. Tonight is the launch." She looked around the room again, at the journalist with her notepad, at Judith in her professional blazer, at the stack of books with my name embossed in gold letters on the cover. "Why didn't you tell us?" Her voice was genuinely confused. I considered my answer carefully. "I've been sharing things with this family for 7 years," I said quietly. "My time, my energy, my presence at every event. And the thing I was always introduced as was helpful. The last time I was introduced to your family, I was called the help. I needed to build this somewhere safe before I brought it to a room where I wasn't sure I mattered." The silence between us held all 7 years of Sunday dinners and water glasses and dish towels and lemonade trays. Diane's mouth pressed into a line. Not the sharp line of offense, something softer, something that looked, for the first time in 7 years, like she was actually seeing me. I left her with that and went to find my mother. The reading was at 7:15. I stood at the podium in a green dress I had bought specifically for this night. My hands shook for exactly the first 4 seconds, and then something settled and I just read. I read the opening pages of The Girl Who Kept the Pencils. The scene where the girl, whose name is Rose, arrives at school early every morning and sharpens pencils for the whole class. where her teacher always thanks her, where her classmates always take the pencils without noticing who left them. And then the scene where Rose, on a rainy afternoon, finally keeps one pencil for herself and uses it to write her name in her own notebook for the first time. Just her name, in big letters. Because she'd been so busy taking care of everyone else that she'd never written it down. By the time I finished that passage, my mother was crying, Mara was crying, Aunt Carol was crying. Diane Ashford, sitting in the third row in her good pearl earrings, had her hand pressed flat against her sternum like she was trying to hold something in. The applause afterward was the loudest sound I had ever heard in a quiet bookstore. Then came the signing. A line formed. Real people, strangers, parents and teachers, and a few children who had come with their families. People who had seen the event listing and come because the premise resonated. A mother told me her daughter was the quiet one in class who always helped others, and she had been looking for exactly this book. A teacher said she was ordering 30 copies for her classroom library. I signed every single one. At the end of the line, Diane was standing with a copy of the book held in both hands, the way I had held it alone in my apartment the first time I opened the box. She set it on the table in front of me. I looked up at her. "Would you sign it?" she asked. Her voice was different. Smaller, more careful. "Of course," I said. I opened to the title page. I paused for a moment, thinking about what to write. Then I wrote, "Diane, there's always been more to me than you could see. I hope you'll look a little closer now. With love, Claire." I handed it back to her. She read it. She looked at me for a long moment. And then, quietly, she said something I had waited 7 years to hear from her. "I'm sorry, Claire. I didn't see you. I should have." It wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't a tearful collapse. It was 7 words, said plainly, in a bookstore in New York City, while her son stood behind her and her husband pretended to look at the shelves because he didn't know what to do with his own discomfort. 7 words were enough. Before I tell you what happened after that night, I need to ask you something. When the person who overlooked you finally admits it, what do you do with that? Do you forgive? Do you hold the line? Tell me in the comments right now, because I genuinely read every single one. And if this story is resonating with you, subscribe so you see the final part the moment it's live. In the weeks after the launch, my life rearranged itself quietly and completely. The Girl Who Kept the Pencils released nationwide on November 8th. The first week, it appeared on 3 regional indie bestseller lists. The Parenting magazine ran a full feature with the headline, "The Teacher Who Wrote the Book She Needed as a Child." My school put a banner outside the front door. My 3rd graders each got a signed copy, funded by a donation from the local literacy nonprofit, and on the morning I read it aloud to them, every single one of them sat completely still. That never happens with 8-year-olds. That's how I knew the story was real. My mother called every day that first week, mostly just to say she was proud. She didn't need to say more than that. Brandon and I had the conversation we should have had years earlier. Not a fight, a reckoning. We sat at our kitchen table with tea going cold between us, and he told me the truth he'd been carrying. He knew his family treated me as less than. He had told himself it wasn't that bad, that I didn't seem bothered, that challenging his mother would only make things harder. He had been wrong, and he knew it, and he was sorry. I told him the truth I had been carrying, that I had stopped telling him things because I didn't trust that he would stand next to me when it mattered. That the book was a secret partly because of his family and partly because of him. He heard it. He didn't defend himself. That mattered. We're not the same as we were before October 14th. We're better. Not perfect, but working at it honestly for the first time, which is a different thing entirely from pretending everything is fine. Gerald called me on a Tuesday. He is not a man who apologizes easily. Decades of running a business have calcified a certain kind of pride. But he called and he asked if he could order a case of books to give to the children in his church's after-school program. He said, "I'd like to do something useful." I thought that was a good start. Paige texted me a long message that surprised me most of all. She said she had watched her mother treat me like furniture for years and had never said anything because she assumed I didn't notice. She said she was ashamed of that. She asked if we could get dinner sometime, just us, and actually talk. I said yes. Garrett said nothing. Stephanie sent a 2-word text, "Congrats, Claire." I accepted it for what it was. Not everything gets repaired and not everyone is ready to do the work. That's their decision to carry, not mine. And Diane is a complicated woman. I don't think she is cruel. I think she built a hierarchy in her family, the way people build habits, thoughtlessly, incrementally, until the shape of it becomes invisible to everyone inside it. I think she genuinely didn't know what she was doing when she handed me the dish towel. I think she genuinely didn't see the distance between who I was and who she had decided I was. I think the book made her see it. Not because it was a success, though I believe that helped in the particular language she speaks, but because of what it was about. Because somewhere in the story of a little girl who keeps everyone's pencils sharp and never writes her own name, Diane recognized something. Maybe a girl she used to know, maybe herself at some point, maybe the woman standing in her kitchen every Sunday who she had never actually asked about. She called me on a Thursday afternoon. I almost didn't pick up. I'm glad I did. She said she had read the book 3 times. She said she had given copies to 2 of her friends from the Historical Society. She said, and this is the part I keep coming back to, that she had recommended it for the children's literacy nonprofit she sits on the board of, and that she had told them in the board meeting that the author was her daughter-in-law. Not the daughter-in-law who helps out, just my daughter-in-law. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't an apology tour. It was Diane Ashford finally introducing me correctly. It was enough. Today, I am sitting in our spare bedroom, which is no longer just a spare room. It has my writing desk, my bookmaking equipment, a corkboard covered in index cards for the second book. My second book, yes, there is one. My publisher asked for it before the first one even launched. Same series. The next book is called The Girl Who Saved Her Own Seat. I think you can guess what it's about. My third graders don't fully understand that their teacher wrote a book that people in other states are reading. They understand it in the way 8-year-olds understand things, completely and immediately, and without the complications that adults bring to everything. One of my students, a quiet boy named Marcus who sits in the back row and always has extra erasers for everyone, came up to me after I read the book aloud to the class and said, "Ms. Ashford, is Rose you?" I looked at him for a moment. "Yes," I said, "and she's also you. She's anyone who's ever been so busy taking care of other people that they forgot to take care of themselves." He nodded very seriously, the way 8-year-olds do when they understand something all the way down. "But she's okay now, right?" he asked. "At the end, she's more than okay," I said. "She's seen." He seemed satisfied with that. He went back to his seat, took out a pencil, his own pencil, not an extra one, and wrote his name at the top of his paper in big, clear letters. I don't think he realized what he was doing. But I did. That's the thing about stories. You write them hoping someone will recognize something, and sometimes they do, in ways you never expected, in a way that makes the whole invisible stretch of years feel like it was building toward exactly this moment. I'm not bitter about the years I spent carrying water glasses and folding tablecloths and baking pies that no one credited me for. Those years made me understand Rose. They made me understand what it feels like to be looked through. And that understanding is in every page of that book. It's why it lands the way it lands. It's why a stranger in a bookstore line told me her daughter finally felt seen for the first time. You cannot write that from somewhere comfortable. So if you're in the middle of it right now, if you're the one who refills the water glasses and gets handed the dish towel and gets introduced as helpful, I want to tell you something. You are not the help. You are the whole story. You just haven't written it down yet. Write your name first. Big letters, at the top of the page. That's where everything begins. From a psychological perspective, Claire's experience reflects what researchers call invisible labor, the emotional and physical work that goes unrecognized precisely because it is done so reliably. When one person consistently absorbs the friction of family functioning without acknowledgement, the family system comes to depend on that invisibility. The labor disappears into the background, and so does the person performing it. What Claire did building something undeniable in private and then stepping into the light of it is a form of what psychologists call reclaiming narrative agency. She stopped waiting for permission to have a story worth telling. She wrote her own. If this resonated with you today, remember this: your worth was never in your usefulness. It was always in you. You didn't need to earn your seat at the table. You never did. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.